Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. And if you're new here, welcome for the first time. Today we're going to be doing a tag, and this is the horror booktube tag. Stay tuned. Okay, so this tag was originally created by Alex TheBookubus, and I was tagged by Book Chat with Pat. And also this book tag was revived for Horror Mayhem by MJ, Reading His Life. And it consists of 12 prompts. And so yeah, this is right up my alley, being all about horror. So let's get going. Okay, so prompt number 1 says, how and when did you get into horror? Okay, the story is that at about the age of 11 or 12, my family moved to England, a little town called Southport. And the thing about living in England at that time, moving from South Africa, is that the television was so much better. You had more choice, especially late night movies, especially late night horror movies. Such as those old Hammer films, and Dracula, and werewolf stuff. And also some of my favourites were The Omen, and The Omen 2 gave me nightmares for weeks. All I can say about that film is remember the scene with the woman, the crow, and the truck. And you'll know what I'm talking about. That scared the crap out of me. And another movie I actually really enjoyed was Abominable Mr. Phibes. So yeah, my love for horror started there, watching all those late night movies when I probably shouldn't have been at that age, but yeah, that's number 1. Okay everyone, prompt number 2 says, what is the first horror book you've ever read? And I've said this lots and lots of times on this channel, but that was Stephen King, It. All, I don't know how many thousand pages, over 1,000 pages. And I absolutely adored it. And I read it when I was about 13, 14. And I used to pretend that I was asleep and lie under the covers with a torch and read it at night. And I think it took me about 2-3 weeks. Yeah, and my studies at that time at school didn't go too well. Prompt number 3 says, what horror related goodness can we expect from your channel? Now, as most of you know, I love focusing more on 20th century horror, kind of vintage horror. I do talk about modern stuff every now and then, novellas and kind of indie horror. But a lot of what I talk about is not just Stephen King, but looking back at the 70s, 80s, 90s. And for me, that's definitely my favorite era of horror. I've also been doing not so much recently, but I've been doing some kind of horror author kind of profiles, videos, and I plan on bringing those back as well. But not just for horror, but also for some dark fantasy. Because I want to look at Neil Gaiman very soon, it's in the works, as well as Ray Bradbury, and I've got a ton of his stuff as well. So yeah. Okay, prompt number 4. Do you have any favourite themes or subgenres with horror? Now, I absolutely love post-apocalyptic, end-of-the-world scenarios where you've got characters in absolutely messed up situations where the world is absolutely ruined. It doesn't have to be a post-apocalyptic situation. I just love those character studies, where people form groups and it brings out the good in people or the worst in people. So I love that kind of thing. And I also love supernatural horror, kind of witches, werewolves, vampires, all that sort of stuff as well. And I love serial killers, like Hannibal Lecter. So I know there are other favourites, but yeah, I'm not going to go through all of them now. So that's my answer for that. Okay, prompt number 5 says, name an underrated horror novel or author. Now, first let's go with a book. Horror novel. That's one of my favourite authors, Clive Barker, and that's Cold Hard Canyon. And it's not his most popular book. people. For me it was a 5-star, and yes, it's kind of debauched, it's very dark, there's a lot of kind of, not really a spoiler, but there's like ghostly sex, and it's almost like S&M feel in some parts of the novel, but it's absolutely phenomenal, and it's terrifying. He wrote it after his dad died, so there's a kind of a tone about it as well, which is quite interesting. And yeah, I really enjoy this, and I think more people should read this book. Okay, as for underrated authors, I've got 2 here. First of all, I'm going to talk about Michael McDowell, and I've spoken about him on my channel before as well. I've read Cold Moon Over Babylon. I have read The Amulet, freaking terrifying. And I've read The Elementals. Now, he is brilliant. He does like Southern Gothic horror so well. Characters and also setting and just this kind of atmosphere is absolutely brilliant. And he needs to be known a bit better. More people need to read him. And I still want to read the Blackwater Chronicles as well, if I can get my hands on it. Okay, and finally we got Toady, Mark Morris. Now Mark Morris, this is also an incredibly underrated novel. I did a review on this. It's got serious It vibes. It is absolutely a spectacular horror novel. And now Mark Morris was not being published anymore, and I was informed by Kelsey from Slime and Slashes. Go and check out her channel, awesome. And she said that the older books are getting published now, getting published very soon. And so I'm very excited about that, because I want to read Stitch. I think it's his 2nd novel, this is his 1st, and so I'm dying to get my hands on that. So yeah, that's Mark Morris. And I have to mention just a classic author that perhaps more people need to read, and someone I discovered last year, and that's Algernon Blackwood. And I read The Willows, it blew me away, as well as Wendigo. So yeah, highly recommended. Prompt number 6, name an overrated horror novel author. Now I'm not going to talk about an author so much, and I'm sorry for all Anne Rice fans, but The Witching Hour just seriously did not do it for me. This book is also taped up and in bad condition, but yeah, I loved Vampire Chronicles. I've spoken about that series, but I found this kind of dull, tedious, very over-descriptive. I didn't concentrate as much on the characters, I didn't enjoy them, and it's just so much detail and so much history that I felt was unnecessary. And the bottom line is that I usually enjoy long novels, but this just did not work for me. That is The Witching Hour. Okay, prompt number 7 is recommend 3 of your favorite horror novels. Now, I've done a top 10 recently. I did a top 20 Stephen King. So I'm going to go for something different. Horror novels that I love, that I don't speak about that much. More I've spoken about, but just something maybe underrated that you really need to read. And those 3 novels are, number 1, Dean Koontz Intensity. Now, a lot of these novels I did not enjoy so much. I love The Watchers, but for me this is my favorite. And it's about an absolutely psychotic villain, serial killer. And then on the other hand, you've got an awesome female protagonist, just a kick-ass heroine, and there's a cat and mouse game between them. And this book gets very dark. Serial killer, and things happen. It does get very, very dark, and there are trigger warnings as well for dogs and stuff that happens. So yeah, but I highly recommend this book, Intensity. Next up we got World War Z by Max Brooks. Yeah, this is a zombie apocalypse novel, but a highly original take on the zombie apocalypse. It's after the fact, and it's reporting and it's interviewing all the survivors, and it focuses on the rich and the poor and governments and kind of man on the street, and how this zombie apocalypse affected, kind of all these different areas of society, and I absolutely loved it. And I know there's another Max Brooks book out at the moment called Devolution, I think it is. And that's definitely on my wish list, so I'm looking forward to reading that. So yeah, that is World War Z. And the final book, I know I have it somewhere but I can't find it, is Fairy Tale by Raymond E. Feist. And this is interesting because Raymond E. Feist is a fantasy author. I've spoken about Magician, one of my favorite books of all time. But this is so much more of a horror than a fantasy. And it's almost like a folk tale, not a retelling, but when these folk tales, fairy tales come alive. And it's very dark, and it's very scary, and there are trigger warnings for rape and all sorts of stuff. And I absolutely adore that cover. So yeah, that's Fairy Tale. Okay, number 8 is recommend a book for someone who is new to the genre. Okay, I've got a couple of things to say here. First of all, 2 of my favorite authors, very much YA, but absolutely brilliant and spooky and scary. And that is Clive Barker, The Thief of Always. And yeah, this is a graphic novel. I've shown it to you before, but there's obviously a book as well. And then we got Neil Gaiman, The Graveyard Book. This is just a gorgeous book. Absolutely beautiful book about this boy who's raised by ghosts in the graveyard, and about this killer that's after him. And yeah, in fact, for a YA book, there are some kind of dark, scary scenes in here, but not so much that someone new to the horror genre is going to be chased off. And in fact, Neil Gaiman, I think, is a nice stepping stone because he does dark fantasy and spooky dark fantasy. He's a great author just to try out if you want to dip your toes into a bit of horror. And then also, I would recommend reading short stories, read compilations, get a feel for authors like Stephen King. If you want to get into him, read some of his short story collections. But that's the same for any author. See if the horror genre is for you or not. And then you can also decide what kind of things you like in the horror genre. Are you more into supernatural? Are you more into paranormal? Do you like body horror? So you can figure those things out by reading lots of short stories. So yeah, that's my answer for that. Number 9. Are there any book to film adaptations that you particularly loved or hated? I'm only going to go with love because I can't really think of any that I couldn't stand. And they're both Stephen King adaptations. And the first one is a short story. In fact, they're both short stories, novellas, okay, both short stories. And the first one is Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, which, as you know, became the Shawshank Redemption. And this is one of those cases where I thought the film was better than the book, which is very rare. The Shawshank Redemption is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I absolutely love it. And the other one is The Body, another Stephen King short story, which became the awesome, beautiful movie Stand By Me. And if you haven't seen that, I highly recommend it. Yeah, that's just a touching coming of age story. These boys that go off in search of this body, walk along the train tracks, and they have the arts. It's awesome. Read it and watch it. Okay, number 10 says, how do you discover new to you horror books? Okay, there's 3 different ways that I think most people would go about it. So, first of all, Booktube. I look for book recommendations. I watch tons of booktubers and their movies and their videos, and the ones that I really like, I write down the recommendations, or I go directly to Goodreads and put it on my wish list or put it on my to be read, so that I can get back to it a little bit later. And another way is also from Goodreads. I look at other people's profiles, what they're reading, what they enjoyed. And then finally, when I go out and browse bookshops, well, we've only got one, but when I browse my bookshop, I find out what I think might look interesting and I buy it. Number 11 says, what was the last horror book you bought? Now, I didn't buy it. It was a gift from my wife. Spoiling me, but we shouldn't be doing that. But it's okay. I love it, baby. And that is Gwendy's Button Box by Stephen King. I really am in the process of trying to collect everything that he has written and to read everything that he has written. So yeah, I want to start this trilogy. That's nice and short as well. So I might start it next month because I've got some other chunkers to read. Yeah, that is Gwendy's Button Box by Stephen King and Richard Chismar. Number 12 says, what horror book is at the top of your wish list? Now you would think I would immediately say You Like It Darker by Stephen King. But no, there's another book that I am dying to get my hands on. And that is Paperbacks from Hell from Grady Hendrix. I would love to get my hands on this. It's an exploration of horror through the 70s, 80s, possibly 90s, I'm not sure. And apparently it is just so brilliantly done. And it's humorous and informative, and I'd love to get my hands on that book, Paperbacks from Hell. Okay, 13 is tag some people. I'm going to tag a couple of people here, 4 people. I want to go with Literary Love. And I'm going to go with Nikhil at Esteem. I think you could come up with a good tag here. I'm going to go with Bad is Rad. I haven't tagged you for a long time, my friend. And I'm also going to go with Bookish Chaz. Chaz, I know you're into fantasy, but I thought it would be interesting if you did this as well, because I've seen you talk horror as well. So for those 4 people, if you've already been tagged, that's fine. And for anyone who wants to do this tag, I know it was actually recreated for Horror Mayhem, kind of brought back to life for Horror Mayhem by MJ. But I don't think it's any problem in carrying it on to June, July as well. So yeah, that's my tagging done. Okay everyone, so that was a horror book tag. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed my responses. Let me know down in the comment section below. Have a conversation with me. I really enjoy that. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep those pages turning. And cheers.